Hey, legend, thanks for joining me once again. I hope you're having an incredible day. Excuse my congested voice. I'm very, very sick right now, but I had to film you this introduction and tell you a little bit about Tom Henschel, who's the man who's joining us today. He runs a company called Essential Communication, which is about communication and more specifically, how executives and leaders can improve what's called their executive presence. And in this episode, or down below this episode rather, he has given us an incredible resource called Sorting and Labeling, which is an essential tool if you want to communicate with clarity and memorability. And this is exactly the sort of things that we go through. We go through an example of sorting and labeling. We go through some really quick tools for you to be able to change how people are perceiving you and get more about what you want in life. Because as much as we're all going more digital and more remote, our human interactions still remain. And this makes sure that you're able to organize your thoughts into a clear message that allows you to connect with people and really move forward in the path that you want to take in life. So I hope you enjoy the episode. People are going to be here forever as much as AI. And one of my buddies sent me a message about generative or general AI today. And lots of the things that we're doing in our lives are becoming quickly obsolete, but the way that we talk and communicate to each other is going to stay. So hope you enjoy the episode. I'll talk to you soon. Okay, Tom, welcome to the show. I'm really appreciative that you're here and really enjoying our pre-recording conversation as well.
Me too. And thanks.
Yeah, what an absolute pleasure. I love, I first heard you, I can't remember, I think it was Ryan Hawke's podcast maybe, but I heard you on a leadership podcast and then, dived down the rabbit hole and have really enjoyed, hearing about how you structure conversations and this, the way that you speak, I think is really, really powerful and you have a great presence. And I'd love to, dive really deep in that with our conversation today. But we always start off with a couple of really quick questions. And I'd love to spend a moment here just getting really present together. And I'd love to know if you're looking back over the last 12 months, what are you really proud of? What's gone really well for you? And what's something that you've really enjoyed in the last 12 months?
I got to spend 30 days in a van with my daughter and her fiance in New Zealand.
Wow.
And it was life-changing. It was fantastic. Being with them was fantastic. Being in New Zealand was amazing. Living in a van, which I had never done before, was so much fun. I am really proud of that month. It was great.
Wow. Sounds like an amazing adventure. How did you end up in a van in New Zealand? Because that's quite far away from where you're at.
Well, they live in Bali. And
Right.
so they came this way and I went that way and we all met together. So,
Wow, cool.
yeah.
How was it? What was your favorite part?
Oh, heavens. My favorite part, aside from living in a van with them, there are so many. There's a vista that I remember that we climbed up to the top of a ridge, and it is like a postcard in my mind. It was so extraordinarily beautiful. I was so moved. And there was stuff like that every day that we saw. It was just, Josh, it was fantastic.
Yeah, what a magical place. And were you in like a big Mercedes Sprinter van? Were you in
Oh
like
no,
a
we were
Wicked
in a
van with spray paint on the side or like?
It was like a Sprinter van. It was small. Yeah, it was very small. So they had lived in a van before for a couple of years, so they kind of knew how to do it, and they made it pretty easy. It was good, but it was
Amazing.
small.
Yeah,
It was
it gets
small.
tight. It gets tight. Yeah.
Yes, we were
Yeah.
definitely in each other's business.
Yeah, 100%. I remember one of the first times I lived out the back of my car. I had a Land Cruiser troop carrier, like a 1993 big, old sort of hospital-looking truck.
Huh.
And yeah, it's definitely something to get accustomed to, for sure. You realize you're like everything you do invades your own space. So if you're cooking and you put something over here, then when you go to bed, it's not like you're like, oh, the trash is on the bed, or like, I left the bottle on the seat, and you're like,
Right. Yes,
like it's
absolutely.
really super invasive. Okay, man. And then if we're thinking about the coming 12 months, looking forward, what are you really excited about looking forward? What have you got? Obviously,
Well,
next few months.
I have lots of different projects going on. Some of them are in my volunteer work. Some of them are in my business. They all feel really exciting and engaging to me, Josh. But so one that I'll talk about, well, this is a trend that I've seen that is changing my business, which is that more individuals than ever are reaching out to me for personal coaching. And I don't mean life coaching. I'm not a life coach. I'm an executive coach, a leadership coach. And and people are reaching out to me from all over the world, from all different kind of levels of their organization. There's just a lot of need at the moment, and I'm really excited to talk to these people. It's fantastic. I get to talk to amazing people, so
Wow.
I'm
Wow.
excited.
Can you tell me more about that? Like, what in particular are they reaching out about? Has that changed over time?
Huh? I would say not. I would say no. I would say people want help with the same kinds of things. They
Right.
want their own promotion, like I'm stuck and want to move on.
Mm.
They want help communicating either downwards with their team or upwards with their bosses. And some of it's about just perception. Like, I've been getting some feedback. I don't know what to do about this feedback.
Right. Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, and people are really generous. They tell me their stories, and it's great. I love what I do.
Yeah. Wow. And would you be able to embellish a little bit about kind of like who is reaching out to you? What would you say the demographic is of people
That
so that the
that's
audience can
part of
get an
what's
idea?
amazing to me. So my corporate clients tend to be in Fortune 500 companies, vice presidents and above. But the
Mm.
people who are reaching out to me through my podcast, sometimes they are senior leaders. Sometimes they're people who listen to my show and they're senior leaders and they would be my target client no matter what. But I also have this an administrative assistant at a church in Texas who called me. And I
Mm.
was like, wow, that's fantastic. Like, what's your story? And like everybody in between. So it's really been interesting. People in companies where they know their company would not pay for coaching, or they're just
Mm.
below the line. So they're like at a senior manager or director level. And, those are the people I started coaching with. I didn't start coaching at the senior executive level. I
Right.
worked my way up like everybody else. So it's interesting for me to be back in conversation with those people because I know so much more. It's been great.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah, we're gonna really strip that back in a little bit, but I'd love to just dial back to kind of like how you started getting into teaching and coaching and stuff like that. Like, we'll go chronologically. And I've heard you mention this before, and we're having a laugh about it. Like, you first started teaching when you were quite young, lining up the toys and telling them what to do. Would you like just like, it seems like you were born to do this, and you've done this since a young age. Could you tell us a little bit about that, and then how it's evolved throughout your life into acting and here? We'll just work our way up.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. So that's true. I mean, I don't think I'm the only kid on the planet who did this, lining up their toys and talking to their toys. But for me, I think it had two parts to it. One of it was performance, that I liked being looked at. That was good for me. I was okay with that. Although I was shy in many ways, but I didn't mind having attention. That was okay with me.
Mm. Hmm.
And I really liked explaining things. And both of those things were true for me for just the longest time. And so I grew up at 10 years old when I was 10 in this little suburb outside of Chicago, little Jewish boy, and I said, I want to be an actor. And luckily I was in a school district where they had lots of opportunities for performance and I did well and I got a lot of opportunities. And then I actually became an actor. I mean, it was like I actually did. By the time I was in my 30s, I was still acting and making a living at it. So it was really interesting that I got to live out my childhood thing. You know,
Mm.
10 years old, I
Yeah,
said
what
I
a
want to
good
be an
feeling.
actor, and I was. So, and um, it always felt good to me. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I liked it. I liked
Yeah,
lining the
great.
kids up. And the thing that happened also simultaneously for me for that was teaching. That I mean, this is just weird. That when I was in high school, I got asked to teach junior high school drama, and so I would drive across town during my school day and go to the junior. It was just it's when I think about it now, I go like, how did that ever happen? But I did it, and it was the combination of the two things that was that kid and talking to his toys, right? It was me as a teacher, and it was me as a performer, right?
Mm.
When I went to Juilliard and got trained, and in my summers I used to come and teach at a program at Northwestern University. Then I came to Hollywood and I taught in a conservatory. I always taught, and teaching made a lot of sense to me, and I was pretty good. I wasn't great, but I was pretty good. And so that's my two things. That's that boy talking to the kids. So I'll stop there for a minute.
Yeah, like how did you, I guess, manage teaching junior high schoolers when you were a high school? Because I imagine there would be like some interesting dynamics going on there
Oh,
as a young
totally.
kid.
Uh, yeah, yes. It
And how the
also
hell did that even come about, actually? Like,
so when I was in junior high school, I took a drama class and it was great for me. I had already been in some little plays, but like I suddenly was learning things and the teacher recognized that I really loved it and was interested in it. And so when I got to high school, she became the principal at the school and they didn't have a drama teacher.
mm,
And she called
that's
and said, "Would you do this for me?" And I was like, "Oh my
how
God,
old were you?
I was 16,
That's so funny.
right? I knew how to drive. And there's the thing, I didn't own a car. My dance teacher at my high school let me go get his keys from his desk, go to the teacher's parking lot, take his car, and drive across town. And then I would come back and put his keys back in his desk. I mean, what an amazing, like, well, that would never happen, ever,
No way,
right?
dude. No way. That's so wild.
Yeah.
Even the idea of like a 16-year-old driving, like, because that's not, you have to be 17 in Australia and have to be adults
Oh,
and stuff
well,
like that. So
okay.
yeah, even that's a trip. Let alone the fact you got the keys out of the drawers and then went and just drove the teacher's car. That's so funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and by the way, I do not think I was a good teacher in those days. I was comfortable. I didn't mind doing it, but I learned
Mm.
as I went, and I learned by having good teachers, and certainly I've learned a lot since I've been a coach. So
Yeah,
I'm a
absolutely.
better teacher now than I used to be.
And what you mentioned, Juilliard? Is this a school? Like, what was that?
So
The
the
first thing
Juilliard
you.
School is a fine arts school. It started, oh my God, it started in the 1800s as a music school, and it became one of the premier feeders to all the orchestras all over the world. And then in the late 50s, I believe, they added a dance school. George Balanchine, who was a famous Russian choreographer, ran the dance school. And then in the late 1960s, they started a drama division. And I was in the second class of that drama division. And we got trained as classical modern American actors. And it was an amazing training. It was 5 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day for 4 years. It was really intense. But a lot of the actors you see now, a lot of the people who are winning Oscars, they went to Juilliard.
Wow.
And yeah, so Juilliard has been a card for me in the way that somebody might say, I went to Harvard, right?
Mm.
When people hear I went to Juilliard, they're like, oh, really? You did? Like, you know what I mean? It catches their ear. And it's been really helpful to me over the course of my life.
Yeah, totally.
Not to mention
How
the fact,
did
by the way, sorry to interrupt, not to mention the
you?
fact that I got trained up the ass. I mean, I got trained so hard. It was great. It's like I really learned a lot.
Yeah, I'm so curious how that changed that all of that, high levels of practice and training in acting, how that changed your life outside of acting. Like, how did that did you start to notice like the ways you were interacting with people and kind of maybe a level of self-awareness that you didn't used to have? Like,
I think what I became aware of was how powerful language was, both spoken and
mm,
unspoken language. Um, and I could see that in my life. I couldn't always manage it, but I was pretty aware that like sometimes I was definitely not getting the results that I want. I didn't
yeah,
know what to change, but things weren't going the way I wanted, and I knew I had a lever somewhere if I could find
mm,
it, and it would
mm,
be in language, body language, something. So I think I learned that as a performer that like, yeah, actually how you say something really changes how people hear it.
mm. And was there anybody that was quite pivotal through that period of time, or maybe after, that helped you get some more results in those things, where you're like, oh, they helped you find the lever, so to speak?
Oh, wow. I There were many. I've been so lucky in my life, Josh, to have so many amazing teachers and mentors. Um, I'll say the one that is the biggest transformation for me is a therapist that I work with who I've been working with now for more than 20 years,
Wow.
who completely changed the way I think about the world and how I see myself in it. And I'm so much healthier now than I used to be. And as a coach, that's really helpful. I can really get out of my own way and
Yeah.
yeah, that's been transformative in my life.
Could you tell me more about that? Like, what was the thing that you think changed, or what
Wow.
was?
I learned to speak for myself. That's what I've learned in therapy. I have really genuinely learned to speak for myself and be aware that when I'm telling stories, they're just my stories. And I mean, all kinds of just personal accountability that has changed me and made my life so much easier, because it's now no longer hard for me to speak for myself. When I was young, one of the ways that I learned to manage in the world was to not speak for myself. And that kept me safe. It kept me safe in my family. It kept me safe at Juilliard. You know, it's like I did not speak for myself a lot of the time. And so you can imagine, like, I didn't show up very well for my relationships. I showed up in a certain way that I think was great, but in terms of genuine intimacy, in terms of really being able to make deep and meaningful connections with people, it was really hard for me. It was hard for me.
Totally.
And this idea of personal accountability and being able to speak for myself makes accountability so easy. But it was a hard journey. It was not easy to get there.
When you say speak for yourself, what do you mean when you say that?
You know, one of the things I've learned is in any given situation, and it could be a business situation where suddenly I have to make a decision and I don't know what the right decision is. It could be with someone in my family where I think, you know, this could go one way or the other. And there's a kind of anxiety attached to it because you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
What I've learned is to really be able to stop and ask myself, what do you want? What do you want? And this is a conversation I have with me. And anything I want is okay because it's mine. And then I can speak for myself. Now, by the way, just because I want it doesn't actually mean I'm going to go after it. It doesn't mean I'm going to negotiate for it. But getting clear on what I want is really helpful. So then I can speak for myself. Yeah. Because I know what I want.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy. That's wild. And I think that it's so, I can really relate to that moment. You know, there's almost like sometimes there's a moment where you're like, oh my God. And then being able to be in that and go, okay, what do I really want here? Instead of like, yeah, I need to say this, just say it. And then just going blah, you know, and saying what you really want is really something that I personally, throughout my younger years, I trained myself to do the opposite, you know, and shut up and keep it inside and not speak for myself, you know, to use your language. And so it's really great to hear that that's something that really impacted you. And yeah, it's been a big impact for myself in my own life.
That's interesting to hear. I don't know whether this is true, but I wonder whether a lot of high performers begin this way. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And by the way,
Go for it.
no, please.
I think of it as like Stephen Pressfield's the War of Art, like who talks about the resistance. You know, for me, that's what it feels like in that moment of saying a thing that I feel like I should say. I think of that as the resistance and being like, and then I have to go through it, you know, and then obviously it becomes easier and there's a muscle there, but it still feels uncomfortable a lot of the time.
Yeah, it can if it's new, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, what I'm aware of is for so many years, I mean, really like decades of my life, where my automatic responses felt completely comfortable to me.
Yeah.
And part of what my therapist helped me see is that, yes, they are automatic and you're good at them and you can do them, but they're not actually in your own best interest. They're not actually helping you move towards what you want. And it's like, oh, that's a problem, you know, like, and then, but it's hard to then change up what that kind of automatic thinking, that automatic response. It's hard to impose structure and go, wait, you know what I mean? It's just hard.
Totally. Yeah. I'd love to know what do you think you like may not have been able to achieve, or what are you really proud of that you've been able to do because you did acting and went to Juilliard and those sorts of things?
Well, one of my precious jewels in my life is my podcast. You know, I've been podcasting for, I think it's 16 years or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. And it's
yeah.
like never missed an episode and whatever. And I've learned so much, but the reason it's one of my jewels is because I get to write it, act it, direct it, produce it. It's my baby. And those are all things I love to do. Writing, directing, acting, producing. It's great. So once a month I get to put on a show. And the people who like it really like it. You know, they really appreciate that it's different. So that's my joy.
Dude, I love it. Yeah, I was like because I flicked through so many shows, and then I was going through interviews like with you on other shows in preparation, and then I clicked on yours, which I hadn't listened to yet, and then I was like, I hadn't read anything about it, and all of a sudden you're just going like energy. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I was expecting a guest to show up or something, but it's you just like telling these stories and teaching through stories. It was really beautiful, so I highly recommend it for anyone that's looking for that sort of work. It's incredible. So
Thanks.
how did you, like, when you were transitioning from this acting world into coaching, was that an accident, or like how did that come about?
Well, it was partly an accident, but yes and no. I mean, there was a point in my career, and I have many stories about this, but there was a point in my career where I realized that my acting career in Hollywood was not going to sustain my family until I was like 60 years old. It just wasn't going to get us that far. And that was really sad for me. I was going to have to give up my dream, and what was I going to do next? And the answer was I was going to teach. I didn't know about corporate training, so I taught in university for a while, didn't like that. But then I found corporate training. And so as my television career was kind of diminishing and getting smaller every year, this new business was beginning to get created, and I was learning all about it. It was a business I knew nothing about, but I knew how to teach. So, but I didn't, Josh, I had never been in an office. I didn't know that there was corporate training. I'd never had a job. I'd been an actor since I was 16. So
How old were you at this point?
so I started transitioning right around when I was 40.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, I started this career right around when I was 40.
Wow, man. It's a long time to not be in an office. It's pretty great. Good. Right?
I loved it. I felt very privileged. I did.
Yeah, totally.
I was grateful.
Wow. Wow, that's so cool.
And by the
So
way,
what was-
I'm still not, because I'm still working for myself, so
Yeah,
nothing's
exactly.
really changed. Yeah.
Exactly. And what were those first requests for? Like, what did people
Oh,
seek you out
so
for?
mostly presentation skills, which makes sense, right? I mean,
Yeah.
presentation skills. It was like, yeah. Um, that was an easy transition for me, and often under someone else's banner, so that I would subcontract to someone who, like, I remember one of my first gigs, maybe it was my very first gig, was at Nissan here in Los Angeles. And I'd, again, never been in a corporate training room. I didn't know what to expect, but that was not my client. Do you know what I mean? I was working for someone else. I could never have gotten Nissan as a client at that point. I had no track record. But I did a lot of subcontracting. I still do, by the way. I still work for my friends all the time.
Right. Wild.
Yeah.
And how did that feel as you transition from, because like you said, there was a bit of sadness. You're like, oh, I'm giving up on my dream or whatever, and then I'm moving to this. Did it fulfill you in the same way? Those first couple times? Like, what was that like?
I really appreciate the question. There was so much sadness to no longer be Tom the actor.
Right.
However, it was a little like kicking a heroin addiction. It feels really good when you're doing it, but there's a lot about it that's hard. And when you're conscious, you look around and go, this is not healthy. There is so much in the entertainment business that is not healthy. And no one's healthy, by the way. I mean, it doesn't matter. More money doesn't make you more healthy. Like,
Right.
there's a lot of ill health in the business. And so it's hard
Like
to be
what?
around.
I don't know. I don't have any
People
context.
people simply being unkind. Well, here it is. It's a world of scarcity. There is never enough. There's never enough budget for a movie. There's never enough employment for the people. There's never enough work to go around. There's never enough anything. And so everybody, millions of people in this town, I live in Los Angeles, it's a company town. Millions of people are living in scarcity every day in their professional life. They don't know what's next, and they have no control over their career. It's an anxious time. It's not kind. So there was a part of me, as I was leaving the business, that was like, thank God. Like, thank you for letting me find a way out of this, because it's not always pleasant. It was hard to live in sometimes. So I was glad that, yes, it was very rewarding for me. And I am so much happier now than I was. And And I guess for me now, what I can see is that I have the ability to make a difference for people. Whereas as an actor, I rarely felt that. Sometimes
Totally.
there were some really key experiences in my life where we did make a difference. But mostly, no, like another episode of Matlock. Who cares, right? Like, you know.
What were those instances where you did make it feel like you made a difference? Because I bet that was pretty. You got the best of both worlds. You got to have the
Oh
thing
my
that you're
goodness.
researching and then also making a difference.
I was in a play here called, it started here in Los Angeles, called The Hands of Its Enemy. And the one of the main characters is a deaf character. She's supposed to be a playwright. And late in the second act, we find out that she's carrying a secret around childhood abuse. And this is in the 1980s when childhood sexual abuse was like not a thing. And one night we're doing this play. This is in like a 750-seat theater that's shaped like a bowl, and it's very intimate and it's completely quiet. And the deaf actress is telling a story about her, what happened to her, and we hear from the back of the house a wail from a woman who clearly was just in total sympathy with this story. It was chilling. It was amazing. And we all heard it. Everybody, right? Everybody in the audience heard it too. That their life was changing in that moment. It was powerful. It was amazing.
Wow. Wow, that sounded spooky as well. You set the stage really nicely there. I was like, I imagine that would have been pretty crazy. And then, just to loop back, as you were going through this transition, like, when did you know? Was there a moment where you were like, okay, this is providing me enough income, or it has enough momentum for me to transition fully into the coaching space and the executive space?
I have to answer that question a little differently because it was not a choice. This was the road I was on. In the same way that when I said yes to Juilliard when I was 17, it was a commitment to a career. I was committed to this. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I got to be surrounded really fast by people who mentored me, and I could look around and go, "Oh, I'd like to be like her. Like that looks good to me." So it was just never a choice. I went full bore for it.
Wow. And what did good look like at that point compared to what good looks like now for you?
At one point, what I wanted to be was I wanted to be an on-staff trainer, because then I could just like do my training stuff every day and not have to, find clients. That's what it looked like at one point.
Sorry, could you elaborate? What is an on staff trainer?
So, a company like Disney, that's a good example. Right. Disney has, hundreds of thousands of employees. Mm-hmm. They have a staff of people who do nothing but training, corporate training, and they go all over the world for Disney, and they deliver these courses for Disney, right? And being on staff there looked really fun to me. I was like, that'd be fun at one point. I didn't pursue that, but that's what fun looked like at one point. And consulting at a high level looked really interesting to me. And
Yeah, and how did you climb, like, as we started talking about the people that you started coaching with and now you're more with the executives, how did you transition into that high level? Is it just time, reputation, or it sounds like a lot of work?
Actually, I'm going to contradict myself now, which is one of the very first jobs I ever had of my own where I was not subcontracting. It was actually something I got by myself. I was at a financial company and I delivered a presentation skills course, and the HR woman came to me and she said, "Do you work one-on-one with people?" And by the way, I didn't have any history. I had not done much of anything. But I said, "Sure, I work one-on-one with people." She said, "The chairman of our board wants 3 of our presidents to be more presidential, and I wonder if you could help them." And I was like, "Sure." I was an actor. I was a director. Like, sure, I can help people be more presidential. So I said yes. So I was playing at a high level right away. And one of the things that was really helpful to me, Josh, was these were clearly, it happened to be 3 white guys, and they were all really smart. but they didn't know what I knew. I mean, and I had no trouble being in the room with these people. I wasn't as good as I am now, but it was like, I was like, oh, this is not a problem. I can do this. But also remember, I'd lived for more than 20 years in show business. This didn't feel like the same kind of high stakes game,
Yeah.
you know? So it was good for me. It was
Wow.
nice.
And is that where you first kind of got your kind of taste of executive presence and what that meant and like how that,
Yeah.
is that where it kind of kicked off?
Yes, because I thought of it behaviorally. I thought of it the way, by the way, I directed a lot in theater here in Los Angeles. And I loved working with the actors. And we used to talk about the physicality of a certain moment. Like literally, I'm not kidding. The way you open that door is going to kill the laugh. You can't open the door like that. And then you change it, and the next night you get a laugh. It's like, oh my God, that worked. And you can see immediately like the effect of behavior. So I came at all of that, like how to be more presidential, behaviorally. Like with the one guys, I was literally, I remember saying to him, you got to put your elbows on the table. He was sitting with his hands in his lap. And I was like, you're supposed to be a president. Like, you know, I didn't say it to him that way, but you know, that's what I'm thinking. It's like, this is just behavioral. Like I can see that. He could not.
Yeah. And I imagine it would be so refreshing for them to have someone talk to them in the way that you're able to talk to them and be like, hey guys, actually don't do this, do that. Whereas nobody else is probably even picking up on the cues, let alone thinking to give them a piece of advice like that.
You know, one of the three guys there was so in tune with the way we worked together, and he found it of so much value. He brought me to his next three companies as he kept moving up around the country. And so, yeah, it was really great because, yes, he was really grateful for the help. He really saw that it made a difference. So, yeah, and it doesn't land on everybody the same way, you know. But, yeah, the people who it helps, it really helps.
Yeah. 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 I imagine. And then those small changes, it's like we go through our lives sometimes being so unconscious of how other people perceive us and thinking that we're being perceived in a certain way. And it takes that external mirror, you know, or someone to share that perspective to go, oh shit, actually, no wonder everyone thinks I'm a dick. You know, you don't realize that that's how you're portraying yourself. You know, like I have a resting bitch face, and I don't even know because that's my face. You know, and so it's like
Right.
I had to become more conscious of smiling and engaging people and raising my eyebrows. You know, otherwise people are like, wow, this guy is really intimidating. You know, was my feedback
Wow.
all the time. So
How did you get that feedback, though?
I think a lot of personal development and like I think being in kind of personal development environments and people sharing honestly how they feel about each other, and then constantly hearing that I was very intimidating, and I was like, oh, I don't feel like I'm an intimidating person at all, but I'm 6'2", I'm quite tall, look like this all the time. I can see how like anyone that's remotely shorter than me can feel like I'm looking down at them or intimidating them. So yeah, it was through there, and then I've been in men's groups for like the last 10 years very consistently, and so getting feedback from groups and stuff like that has been really helpful. Feedback, definitely not my own awareness, that's for sure.
But that's always part of the problem, right? Is that we don't really know how people perceive us.
Yeah. And it's like you can go through life having no awareness, unless there's someone like you who you hire or bring in, or you're actually going out and actively asking for it. It's really...
I actually start my coaching with a different assumption, which is everybody knows. Everybody knows their feedback. They've been hearing it since they were a kid.
Interesting.
I believe that. Now, they may not have dealt with it. They may not have internalized it. It may not even mean, they may think it's a compliment. But everybody knows. And it changes how I have coaching conversations with people. Because what I get to say to people, especially in a place that might be vulnerable, I get to say to them, look, here's this feedback. I understand it stings. What do you know about it? And I don't mean what do you know about it in this report. Know about it in your life. Because usually people have some awareness. Some, I think. What do you think?
I can 100% admit to that there's a level of satisfaction when I've gotten feedback that I'm intimidating. 100%. I'm like, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think you're totally right. When I actually like look at myself honestly, I'm like, yeah, that's true. Probably already knew it.
Huh. But then you chose to change it.
Yes. Yes. Because I think that that ruined, like, I found that people, like, I was moving through life with less connection. And I actually really, really care about people. And I pour a lot of time and energy into the people that I care about. Um, and so it was stopping. Like, I don't have a problem going up and approaching someone and saying, "Hey, g'day, my name's Josh. How you doing? Pleasure to meet you." You know, and like, whereas like, I know that if I'm smiling, you know, someone's more likely to come up to me. But if I'm looking very serious and intimidating, then the likelihood of someone coming and talking to me is slim to none, I think.
You said something really interesting about connections. At what age did you know that connections were important to you?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I did my first personal development workshop when I was like 18. My mum, we had a very tumultuous home life after my dad left. And I think that in that workshop, I like took off like a mask that I'd put on, which was like being the golden boy and being a very good boy. Like my portrayal to the world was that I was a good kid, you know, and I did everything right. And especially to my mother. And in the background, I was like selling drugs and doing all sorts of naughty stuff. Like, so it was like, I think in this workshop, like I took off this, this facade that I had. And I really just like, I just love people. I love talking. I love listening. I love this conversation that we're having and getting to learn about your life. And I, I think it was from there onwards that I really realized like how much I just enjoy connection. And I think that it also has like a spiritual element to it of that's how I see God, you know, is connection, is like the way that things are connected, nature, human to human, you know, that's how I see God in the threads between things, I think.
How nice for you that you've created this life where you can do that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that was a really great question. Made me think a lot. I was like, where did that come from?
Hey,
So,
I'm a
yeah.
coach.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. So, if we transition now into kind of a bit more of your expertise, I'd love to talk about this executive presence piece in smaller businesses, if you can. Have you had people reaching out from like, you know, you said you've got people who are from all sorts of different backgrounds now, you know, in a higher frequency, not just the executives in the Fortune 500 companies. Could you explain, maybe start off with a little bit about executive presence, what that means, and how, and if you've seen it, you know, being requested from smaller companies?
Yeah, I think executive presence is one of those things that we recognize when we see it. And I don't think it has anything to do like, oh, executive presence only is in like companies of more than 1,000 employees. I think executive presence is like what we respond to. And if you're going to even do a small startup or something, you will have people who will be listening to you and need to understand the business. And it's your job to communicate to them. Having executive presence just helps. It helps everything. When you can make it easy for people to listen, you will get better results. And it's
And
hard. It's hard to make people listen. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no, no. I was just going to ask a little bit of a follow up about like, what would you say? There's executive presence, and then there's like being someone who's charismatic and likable. Maybe you could help paint a picture of the difference between those two.
Huh.
Because sometimes when we think of a leader as like someone who's quite, you know, when we look in movies, it's oftentimes someone who's like very grandiose and like bigger than life and like super likable and charismatic. But in real life, sometimes that's not what you need as in a leader.
Well, it's, again, I don't think there's one brand. I have seen lots of different leaders, all of whom I think have executive presence, but man, there are a lot of different flavors, you know? So I think people can be charismatic with executive presence, sure. I mean, I don't think you have to be charismatic to have executive presence. Does that am I making sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because I think there's there's an element sometimes, and I can only speak from my own experience of like wanting to be liked by the people that I'm leading, but part of my team and stuff like that. And sometimes I slip too much into being a friend, and then it shifts the dynamic. And then that's not what they need. You know, it's not that I can't be nice to them and I can't care about them, but it's like it changes the dynamic. And then when we're needing to do things and move forward or give critical feedback and stuff like that, the dynamic has shifted, you know?
Oh, I
Notice
do
that?
know.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it's hard working with family and friends. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And what about like, I feel like I want to make my team become friends because I like them, you know, and that also shifts the
Oh,
dynamic. So it's like people that I
that's
haven't,
interesting.
that I'm like, you know, let's say I'm leading a team of 30 people or whatever, and then I want everyone to like me, you know, and or sometimes I just don't care, and so I'm like very much doing the. I mean, they're liking me, and I'm really taking care of them, and they're my friends, or I'm like, get out of here, you suck. And so it's like, do you have any advice or feedback for someone like myself who trying to find that balance of being a leader, but also, you know, not necessarily caring too much about being liked. Not that you're not being nice, but
Right.
is that clear?
It is clear because I think here's the conflict. As I hear it, the tension gets set up between I really do like you. We are friends. That's one part. And the second part is I have business to do. And there may be times when those feel like they're in conflict. And I think to have the conversation ahead of time and say, you know, for this time in my life, I am often going to choose the business. And I hope it will not hurt our friendship, but I am going to put the business first. I think that can be really clarifying for people.
Yeah, yeah, because I find like the guys that we talk to are very much entering that phase of their life of just being like, okay, it's time to get after it. You know, and there's an opportunity and there's the push forward and how to not burn bridges, you know, while still
Right?
caring about the people in your life.
Yeah. Yes.
So what would you say are some common mistakes you see people make in these sorts of arenas? If, for example, with trying to develop an executive presence.
Well, I don't think there are any mistakes. I think we all have habits. And I think the game is about getting conscious of your habits and what's working and what's not. And again, if you think about my training at Juilliard, where, you know, we learn to be incredibly intentional with our bodies and our voices, that's part of what I think people are trying to do to improve their executive presence. Get aware of your body and your voice. And you got to be able to use language too. I mean, or get someone who can.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And so I think that's a really important point is like leaning on your strengths, you know, and having if like if that's not your strength, being able to have someone on your team who can be that, you know, as a part of the team. I'd love to talk about kind of like brains. You've mentioned this before, like our brains are set up to receive what they're expecting. And so the importance of taking the time to figure out what you're going to talk about. You have these 4 points that you talk about in this regard. Could you expand on that and riff on that for a bit?
Yeah. So when you're talking about the 4 points, I want to be sure. You're talking about the ones that begin with creating a headline, those 4 points?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Oh, well, this is. So let me pick up on what you said about our brains are set up to receive things. Could I do a quick demo?
Yeah. Demo away.
Okay. So the tool that I'm about to show you, these 4 things, is called sorting and labeling. And I think sorting and labeling can be done on the fly. You don't need to do a lot of planning for it. You can do it. It's not that hard. What I want to do, just to show this illustration of our brains and how we can help our brains, I want to talk about something without sorting and labeling and then with sorting and labeling. So all you have to do is just listen and then at the end tell me which you like.
Yeah.
So you ready? Here we go. So you remember I talked about that I used to start as a presentation skills trainer, right? So listen, I've gotten to watch people in all over the world with presentation skills, and I have learned that the ones who are really good at it, they get plucked. People pick them for projects. People experience them as incredible. People can listen to their material often when it's really complex, and these people can make it so that it's understood, and they often can repeat it too. Like that gets attributed back. Time out. Pause. I don't know how that was for you, but that was number one. That was without sorting and labeling. Let me now just show you a different way of listening, different way of hearing your brain, getting your brain. So you remember I mentioned that I was a presentation skills trainer, right? So there has been something that has been amazing to me over the years as a presentation skills trainer. I've gotten to do it all over the world with people at all different levels. And when I think about what people want help with and what will help them, it always seems to fall in the same three categories. It's amazing. Just three. They are credibility, understandability, and memorability. And those three things, when I end up talking to people, it's always in one of those buckets. Let me talk about the third one first for a second, memorability, because, I don't think people think about it a lot. Like, oh, I want my stuff to be memorable, but I think it helps when you can. And one thing you can do is simply do like mnemonics, like credibility, understandability, memorability. They're all one word. They're all multisyllabic. Okay, time out. So one was without sorting and labeling, and I was talking about presentation skills. And one was with sorting and labeling, talking about presentation skills. Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I barely remember the first one, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah, which is, by the way, I'm serious. I think it's how most of us talk to each other. Like in a meeting or something, when you're thinking of something for the first time, you're just thinking out loud. And I get it. But you could sort and label. Sorting and labeling is not that hard. You could start by saying, I'm not sure, but I think there's two big parts about this that worry me. You could start like that. Right? And just go for it. Start with a number and be clear. It's really helpful.
Yeah. Well, so could you expand more into like how you chunk that out? So creating a headline, sort to folders.
Yeah. Sure. Oh, yeah, sure. So, so let me teach the tool. So sorting and labeling has four parts to it. If you want people to listen to you, you have to give them a headline and stop talking. That's the key. A headline and stop talking. So their brains have a minute to go and take it in, and they know they've opened their own folder, if you will. Then you get to say something like, I don't know, like I said to you, I talk to all these people, it always falls in the same three categories. I know what happens in your brain at that moment. You have three slots, three folders, three buckets, whatever it is in your head. I know that I just put them there. I know I did. So now all I have to do is tell you the labels to the folders and tell you which folder I'm in. So you create a headline, you sort it into folders, you label the folders, and then you transition people in between the folders. It's really simple. And it's amazing, by the way, you sound like a genius.
Yeah. I think because people actually understand you versus the massive information word vomit. Yeah. And is this one of the? I guess where did you come up with this? Where did you get this from? Like, it's really.
Oh, this is not. I did not invent this. So I came across this almost immediately when I started studying presentation skills material. Yeah, it's out there in all different kinds of flavors. This is just my flavor, and I call it sorting and labeling. And I've got a PDF that I can give you, and you can give your listeners.
Lovely.
Yeah. It's great. It's really helpful. But no, it's not like original. You know what it is? There's an old saying. I don't know if it's in Australia, but it's certainly in the U.S., which is about the formula for a good presentation. You tell them what you're going to tell them. You tell them, then you tell them what you told them. That's an old, right? I mean, we've all heard that 100 times. And I think that's, by the way, I'm not kidding. I think it's 100 years old. Easy. I'm serious. Well, that's kind of what sorting and labeling does. That's, you know what I mean? It's just doing it in a different way. Same thing. Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. What do you think you've learnt or changed your perspective on over the years of being an executive coach and doing this?
Wow. I think what has really changed for me is I think I used to hear certain stories and judge people. Like in my heart, I was thinking, you're an idiot. You know? Like, really, you're an idiot. But, I mean, that I didn't put that into the room, obviously, but I don't feel that way much anymore.
Right.
I've got a lot more compassion than I used to.
What do you think changed that?
Well, me continuing my therapy and continuing my own growth, but also listening to people and realizing everybody has some place where they have a pain. Everybody has some place where they'd like to be better. Everybody has aspiration. Um, yeah, most people are
Yeah,
not
totally.
unkind. They may not be competent. I'm serious, but they're not unkind.
Yes. Yeah, totally. It's well that inner work, how much that affects so much more, like you said, the accountability and the way you get to show up in the world, and then therefore the connections that you have with other people is really beautiful. And is there something that you teach that you think lands particularly well, or do you think that lands on a large swath of people, more than others? Like, what do you think? Do you have a highlight teaching point that kind of really hits the nail on the head for a lot of people?
That's so interesting. I'm kind of running through my Rolodex. Um, I don't think there's one because I find that my coaching tends to fall in kind of groups.
Mm.
So some people really are not good at what used to be called soft skills, what I call relationship skills.
Yeah.
And so, that's a whole different conversation than, a leader who actually needs help just leading her team. It's just really a different set of tools. So I don't know that I have one kind of thing where I go, yeah, I'm sure I'm going to talk about this. The conversation that I have a lot with people, I wonder what you'll think about this. A conversation that I have a lot with people is they are willing to believe that if they did something differently, they would get a different result. Learn to respond differently, use sorting and labeling, whatever. And their concern is that it makes them inauthentic. It's like putting on a mask and then I'm not a genuine leader anymore because it's fake because I'm putting it on. Now, I have that conversation with people a lot. I wonder where
Yeah.
that lands with you. What do you think?
I've got my own opinion. I'm super curious. I want you to keep going. Like, what do you think? And then I'll share my thought afterwards. Do you feel
So
like that's
when,
real, or do you feel like that's...
well, I think it's a real experience, right? I think that is what their concern is that I'm going to be acting, to which I go, that's right. You're going to be acting with intention. But it is not inauthentic. It is not something you don't want to do. It's not something that morally violates you. It's you trying to learn new behavior. It would be like changing your golf swing. It's not a moral dilemma. It's, you're going to, stop moving your hips that way. You're going to, whatever.
Yeah.
So when people can see it like that as behavior, right? And that they're going to have to build muscle, like going to the gym. You have to do it in repetition. You have to do it more than once. When people start to see it like that, they go, oh, okay, all right. Then it's not that I think that ends the authenticity argument. I think.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think it's so... I think of it like we all learnt how to behave a certain way or be a certain way from something. So then does that make my entire life inauthentic? It's like I reacted to my parents in a certain way, so I learnt how to be, very nice, like the golden boy style or whatever it was, and I learnt that based on my environment. Whereas it feels more authentic because I'm getting to make a conscious choice about how I'm interacting with the world and the people around me.
And making connections.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
What do you think?
This idea that our behavior has a reason, I often talk about with people. I talk about with people around the fact that you now want to change some behavior does not make that old behavior bad
Right.
or wrong. It often was a survival skill.
Totally.
So it's like, don't judge what happened. That's okay. I mean, that happened, and we're learning from it, and you're about to make a new choice. That doesn't mean the old choice was bad.
Where do you think that comes from? Like this feeling that a change in our behavior like that, like you said, feels like we're acting or being manipulative or putting on a show. Like, why do you think we perceive that as being negative? Whereas, like, if you go to therapy, for example, like in my therapy experience, sometimes the therapist is helping me be more aware of a behavior that I'm doing that's negative, and I'm trying to change that, and it's viewed as positive. Like, why do we view that those two opposite? Any idea?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I don't know for sure. I'm aware that for many people that I talk with, that idea of trying something new makes them self-conscious, and so they feel less competent,
Wow.
right? In that moment because they're distracted. They're trying to learn this new communication thing, this sorting and labeling thing, right? And so their old pattern is gone. They don't get to walk unconsciously. And that, their attention is suddenly in a new place that they're not used to, and so they don't do as well. It's uncomfortable. I understand why you might want to avoid that. Yeah, I do.
Totally, totally. Yeah, and do you mind if we go back to talk about kind of like you have people in groups. So some people like they need better soft skills. Some people like they just need to learn to be a little better leader. Do you see like those are two groups? Do you see that there's three or four or five that you often see the types of people that you work with or the help that you? Yeah.
Well, at the moment, I want to say that that's not a bad sort. And let me put it in a different way. If the soft skills are people skills
Mm,
and the leadership skills are more process skills, then no,
sure.
it's a pretty, I would say is it a 50-50 split? No, I tend to coach more on the relationship side, but I think that's not a bad sort, those two
Mm,
categories.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Interesting. And how do you have tools that you think help people, or that you could share that would help people in each of those categories that are listening? They're like, yeah, I really need help with the relationship side of things. Do you have one or two words of advice for them to get better at that? And then same for the process driven.
Oh, sure, I can take a shot at that. I
And I get that. I know
on
that it's a very broad question. I know, but
the people side though, I would say where you started, which is you got feedback, whether you could deal with it or not. You heard that feedback for a long time about yourself,
mm,
right? So when
mm,
you finally went to take action on it, you had a bank already, and that actually helped you. All those years of feedback, I think, probably helped you because you'd been thinking about it. Um, on the relationship side, I want to say to people, listen to your feedback. You know what your feedback is. Work on it. You're probably seeing it in your performance reviews. It's showing up in all kinds of ways in your life. You're probably hearing it from your partner. Like, deal with it. Do what you can, whatever that means. Right? So that's that side. That's what I would say. That made you smile.
I like it. I like it because ultimately it feels like it comes down to looking in the mirror and kind of being honest with yourself and being like, I know what I need to work on, and
Right.
then doing it.
And then doing it and finding out what that is. I mean, clearly you and I both like therapy. There's all kinds of ways to work on it, but to try and build your awareness.
Mm,
On the other side, I just want to say for me, over and over and over and over again, what I see is it comes down to clarity. When I ask people, what do people know? Do people know how things are going to be measured? Do people know what the timeline is? Do people know what you expect of them? I mean, just do people know?
mm.
Does the team know what their primary job is? I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, it's amazing because a lot of times people don't know. And it's the leader's job to tell them. So I have all these tools to help teams and leaders be more clear because being more clear would be so much helpful. It would just help.
Man, I think that's a great place to end it. And I think that that's really important. That was perfect.
Excellent. I'm glad.